Okay, so today we're going deep on something pretty interesting. I think it's Ori Hofmekler and the Warrior Diet.
Yeah.
Um, and we're pulling from the book Max Muscle Min Fat and also some other sources that you shared with me.
Yeah.
The idea for today is to really get a handle on like what this warrior diet thing is all about. I feel like I've heard about it for years and years and years, and I
Yeah.
never really I've seen like the broad strokes, but we want to
Yeah.
really get into like what are the nuts and bolts of this and how does it actually claim to, boost our energy and help us perform better both physically and
Yeah.
mentally and build a better body composition.
So, you're right. It's been around for quite a while. And I think what really is sort of the attention-grabbing headline of the Warrior Diet
Yeah.
is this idea that, you're going to eat less during the day and then overeat at night. And that's sort of like
Yeah.
the real soundbite that people remember.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I feel like I always thought of it as a way of timing your meals, but it's clear from the stuff that I've been looking at that it's like a whole philosophy, like it's not just when you eat, but
Yeah.
it's how you eat and what's going on in your body when you eat, and
Yeah.
it's all supposed to be tied into this kind of like anabolic cycle and,
Excellent. Right.
hormones and all this stuff. So,
There's a real framework there. So let's try to break it down.
yeah, let's do it. So, I think a good place to start is like who is this Ori Hofmekler guy, right?
Yeah. He's a really fascinating character.
Yeah.
Not your average diet book writer.
Yeah.
He's a former Israeli Special Forces member.
Oh, wow.
He's an artist. He's a fitness expert.
Interesting.
So he's got this kind of like background that lends itself to, looking for strategies and ways to optimize performance. And it's
Yeah.
both physical and mental performance. And
Yeah.
that's sort of the core.
Yeah, it makes sense that a guy with that background would be interested in like, the most efficient ways to get your body and your mind to work
Totally.
optimally. And it seems like his own experience kind of drove him in this direction, right? Like he was saying that, he would train really hard
Right.
and he was feeling just kind of burnt out, and that was kind of what got him
Yeah.
thinking differently about, maybe the way we normally eat isn't the
Yeah. The conventional wisdom wasn't working for him, and he wanted to,
yeah.
find something that worked better.
Yeah, so that led him to this core principle of the warrior diet, which is all about kind of like aligning with your body's natural anabolic cycle, right?
Yeah. It's really about uh, getting in tune with the way our bodies are supposed to work.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, during the day, you have this under-eating phase, which is a little bit catabolic, so it's kind of like a breakdown phase. And then at night, you switch gears into this overeating phase, which is anabolic, where you're
Yeah.
building things up.
I like how he talks about, becoming the hunter, not the prey, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It's like, it's about, taking control instead of feeling like you're...
Yeah, being at the mercy of your hunger.
Exactly. So the initial idea of having just one big meal a day, it might sound kind of weird to some people,
See,
right?
it does. It sounds
Yeah.
counterintuitive, especially
Yeah.
in our world if you eat 6 small meals a day or snack all the time. But what the warrior diet argues is that this one big meal can actually lead to, consistent energy, better weight management.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is, this book, The Warrior Diet, came out in 2002.
Right.
And even way back then, it was being seen as kind of like, fascinating and really effective way to approach, your lifestyle and your health. So,
I think it speaks to, how different this idea was.
yeah.
And how much it resonated with some people even back then.
Yeah. I guess so. Let's get into the details of it. So during this undereating phase, which he calls the fight,
Yeah.
right? What are we actually eating?
So during the fight phase, which usually is most of the day, you're focusing on small amounts of raw fruits and vegetables, maybe a little protein.
Okay. So when they say small amounts, what are we talking? Like what would be an example of that?
So, think about like a handful of berries, maybe some raw carrots and celery sticks,
Okay.
and, a small portion of maybe some chicken breast or some fish.
Gotcha. So not total deprivation, but just keeping it really.
Right. It's about keeping it minimal and keeping it clean.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea behind that is to like keep your body in that slightly catabolic state, so you're burning fat.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Yeah.
You want to be in that fat-burning mode
Yeah.
during the day, and also you want to be alert and focused.
Yeah. I know some people are probably listening. They're like, wait a minute. I thought like if you don't eat enough,
Yeah.
you'll get tired and you'll crash. But
Right. But the idea is that, you're not completely starving yourself. You're still getting some nutrients,
yeah.
and your body is adapting to using its stored energy.
Okay, so then we get to the fun part, right? The overeating phase,
Well,
the feast.
yeah, this is what everybody looks forward to.
This is where it gets good. So this is in the evening, and this is where we have a big nutrient-dense meal. But there's also a specific order that we're supposed to eat the food.
Yes, that's really important.
Yeah.
So the order is vegetables first, then protein and fats, and finally your carbohydrates.
Okay, so why that order?
So there's a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah.
Starting with the vegetables helps you fill up on fiber and nutrients, so you're getting that good stuff in first.
Okay.
And then having protein and fats next helps to keep your blood sugar stable.
Gotcha.
And then finally you have your carbs, which at this point, since you've been in a low-carb state for most of the day, they're going to be really effective at replenishing your glycogen stores.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like each food is like prepped, you've prepped your body for the next type of food.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about optimizing the way your body processes the nutrients.
Yeah, and there's this idea of like really listening to your body too, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's not about mindlessly stuffing yourself. It's about eating until you're satisfied
Yeah.
and really being in tune with those hunger cues.
Okay, so let's talk about like some of the biological mechanisms that are going on here that are supposedly making this work.
Okay.
So first of all, the anabolic cycle. We keep hearing about that. So how does the warrior diet kind of tie into that?
So the basic idea is that you're exaggerating these natural cycles that our bodies already go through,
Mm.
right? So during the day, we're naturally a little bit more catabolic. We're breaking things down. We're using energy.
Okay.
And at night, we're more anabolic. We're rebuilding and repairing tissues.
Okay.
So the warrior diet is just taking those natural rhythms and making them more pronounced.
So like amplifying them.
Exactly, amplifying them.
Okay. Okay, and growth hormone. We've heard a lot about growth hormone G8.
Growth hormone is a key player here.
How does the warrior diet supposedly affect that?
So, both undereating and intense exercise can stimulate the release of growth hormone. And growth hormone is like the master hormone for muscle building and fat burning.
So would you say that like exercise is kind of an assumed part of this whole thing?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a hardcore athlete to do the warrior diet,
Right.
but I think it definitely works better if you are incorporating some form of exercise.
Yeah, and the whole max muscle, min fat, the name of the book itself suggests that
Yeah.
it's not just about the diet, it's about the...
That's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay, so growth hormone, and then we see this insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1.
IGF-1. Yeah, this is another really important hormone.
What does it do?
So it's a powerful anabolic hormone as well, and it's got both short-term and long-term effects.
Okay.
In the short term, it acts kind of like insulin. It helps to get nutrients into your cells.
Okay.
But in the long term, it plays a role in cell growth and differentiation. So it's really important for building muscle and other tissues.
Gotcha. So this whole thing about like the big meal at night,
Yeah,
that's kind of like driving this growth hormone. And
exactly. You're giving your body the fuel it needs to build and repair.
Okay. Okay, and then we see insulin sensitivity as well. How does the warrior diet supposedly help with that?
So the periods of undereating actually improve your insulin sensitivity.
Okay, and why is that important?
Well, insulin sensitivity is really important for managing your blood sugar levels
Mm-hmm.
and preventing fat storage.
Okay.
When you're insulin sensitive, your cells are better able to use glucose for energy.
Gotcha.
And that means that less glucose is going to get stored as fat.
Okay, and that makes sense because, when you're eating less frequently,
Yeah,
your body's not getting these constant spikes of...
exactly. You're not constantly bombarding your system with sugar.
Okay. And then there was this interesting term, the great pump.
The great pump. Yeah, this is a phenomenon that bodybuilders often talk about.
Okay.
And it refers to that feeling of increased muscle fullness and definition that you get the day after a competition or a really intense workout.
Okay, so how does that tie into this?
Well, the idea is that during the undereating phase, your muscles are somewhat depleted of glycogen.
Okay.
And then when you finally have that big feast, your muscles just soak up all those carbs and they get super full and hydrated.
Ah, so it's almost like a rebound effect?
It's kind of like a rebound effect, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And then carbohydrate timing. We hear a lot about carbohydrate timing these days.
Yeah.
How does that play a role in this whole anabolic process?
So carbohydrate timing is all about, when you eat your carbs and how that affects your body's response.
Yeah.
And in the warrior diet, the idea is that you're saving most of your carbs for that evening feast.
Okay.
And that's because after a period of low-carb intake, your body is primed to use those carbs to replenish glycogen stores and build muscle.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about a few hormones already, but then we also see thyroid hormones mentioned.
Yeah, thyroid hormones are crucial for regulating our metabolism. And the warrior diet might influence thyroid hormone activity by cycling between periods of low and high energy availability.
Okay, so, a lot of people think of cortisol as being like the bad guy, the stress hormone.
Right.
But our sources talk about how adrenal hormones like cortisol and aldosterone, they actually have important
They
functions.
do. All hormones have a purpose.
Yeah.
Cortisol is involved in our stress response. It helps regulate blood sugar. It even has some anti-inflammatory effects.
Okay.
Aldosterone helps regulate our electrolyte balance, which is important for blood pressure and fluid balance.
So the idea is not to eliminate these hormones completely, but to just manage them.
Exactly. It's about managing them through our diet and our lifestyle.
Okay. Okay. And then testosterone, we see a little bit about testosterone.
Testosterone is the king of anabolic hormones.
Hmm. How does the warrior diet supposedly affect testosterone levels?
Well, our diet, our exercise habits, and our sleep quality all play a role in testosterone production.
Yeah.
And the warrior diet, with its focus on, cyclical eating and intense training, could potentially have a positive impact on testosterone.
Okay. Okay. And then the last thing we see mentioned is inflammation, and specifically the role of dietary fats.
Right. So the balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in our diet
Mm.
can really influence inflammation in the body.
Yeah.
And chronic inflammation can actually hinder muscle growth and fat loss.
Really?
So it's important to make sure we're getting enough omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory.
So it's not just how much fat we eat, but what kind of fat.
Exactly. It's about the quality of the fat and the balance between those two types.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about practically speaking.
Yeah.
If someone's thinking about, trying this warrior diet, what are some of the things they should keep in mind?
So the first thing is that meal composition during that feast is really important.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're getting enough protein, healthy fats, and complex carbs.
Yeah. So it's not just like a free-for-all, eat whatever you want kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. It's about making sure you're getting those nutrients in
Okay.
to support muscle growth and recovery.
And what about post-workout nutrition?
So even though the main feast is later in the evening, the sources do recommend having a recovery meal after you work out.
Okay.
This meal should include both protein and carbs to help your muscles recover.
Okay, so it's like a smaller meal right after exercise and then the big meal later on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and how does the warrior diet help with both fat loss and muscle gain, which a lot of people think of as kind of like opposite goals?
Right, so the warrior diet is trying to achieve both by using those two distinct phases.
Yeah.
So the undereating phase creates a calorie deficit, which helps with fat loss.
Okay.
And then the overeating phase provides the nutrients needed for muscle growth.
Okay.
So you kind of go back and forth between these two states.
Interesting. So would you say this is like a form of intermittent fasting?
It is. It's definitely a type of intermittent fasting.
Okay.
And it's cyclical in nature.
Okay. Are there any variations of it that are mentioned?
Yeah, so the main focus is on that daily cycle of undereating and overeating. But the sources also mention the possibility of extending the undereating phase for longer periods, maybe even up to a day or two.
Okay, so it's like a more advanced version.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Okay. And as with anything, I guess listening to your body is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, so you have to pay attention to how you're feeling
Yeah.
and adjust the diet accordingly.
Okay, okay. So we've talked a lot about the diet itself, but we haven't really talked much about exercise, which I think is an important part of this.
Right. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the book is called Max Muscle Men Fat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So clearly exercise is part of the equation.
Yeah, it's not just a diet book. It's a
lifestyle plan.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we also have some interesting endorsements and personal experiences that are mentioned in our sources.
Okay.
So Pavel Tsatsouline, for example, he seems to be a fan of this whole thing. He talks about functional strength.
Yeah, Pavel's all about functional strength, so he definitely sees the value in the warrior diet's approach.
Yeah, okay, and Ori Hofmekler himself, he actually collaborated with Robert Kennedy back in the 90s.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, for publications like Penthouse and Muscle Mag International.
So he's been in the game for a while.
Yeah, clearly he's been around for a while.
Interesting.
And then we see Bill Phillips, who was originally kind of a skeptic.
Yeah.
He actually ended up collaborating with Hofmekler on the Warrior Diet book.
That's a big endorsement.
Yeah, it is. He's basically saying okay, I was wrong. This guy's onto something.
Yeah, he came around.
Yeah, exactly. And then Brian Haycock, he describes the Warrior Diet as, distinctive and highly satisfying,
Right.
which is interesting.
Yeah, it suggests that it's not just effective, but it's actually enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. And then Mauro di Pasquale and Udo Erasmus, they both talk about how it's effective and it's like aligned with our natural instincts.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
This idea that the warrior diet is tapping into something primal.
Yeah, it keeps coming up this idea of like going back to our roots.
Yeah, it's like we've kind of gotten away from how we're supposed to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Hofmekler himself, he talks about his own experience, with burning out from training
Yeah.
and how that kind of led him to this realization about cyclical eating.
Right. It was his own personal journey that inspired him to create this diet.
Yeah, okay, so to kind of bring it all together, the warrior diet is really all about this cyclical pattern, right? Under-eating during the day, overeating at night.
Exactly.
And it's designed to work with our body's natural rhythms.
Yeah, it's about getting back in sync with our biology.
Yeah, and the sources point to a whole bunch of potential benefits. More energy, better fat burning,
Yeah.
better muscle growth, better mental clarity.
It's a pretty comprehensive approach.
Yeah, it is. And, we've given you a lot of information in this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unique and in some ways unconventional approach to diet.
Yeah, it's definitely not the mainstream.
Yeah, but we encourage you to think about it and see if any of these principles might resonate with you.
Maybe there's something here that could help you achieve your own health and fitness goals.
Yeah, and it really comes down to like listening to your body,
Absolutely.
which is something we should all be doing anyway.
And this brings up a really interesting question for all of us.
Yeah.
We live in this modern world where food is so abundant and we're constantly being told to eat all the time.
Right.
But what if we could actually improve our health and well-being by reconnecting with more ancestral rhythms of eating?
That's a really interesting thought.
It's something to ponder.
It is, for sure.
Maybe the warrior diet is a way to tap into that ancient wisdom.
Yeah, maybe it's not about restricting ourselves, but about working with our body's natural tendencies.
Right. It's about finding that balance between feast and famine.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So we'll leave you with that thought.
Awesome. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
My pleasure.
I think we learned a lot today.
I did too.
Okay, well, we'll see you next time on Deep Dive.
See you.
Bye.